Thank you, Wen, for that very generous introduction. Good afternoon and welcome to my presentation. I wanted to talk about this topic because this is what I heard from my peers, what I read, and what I experienced in the field. I believe this will be very valuable and will save you a lot of grief and even make you, your boss, your peers, and your department look great in the eyes of management and the board. But best of all, this will help you achieve compliance with version 4.0. Now, I know that this is the time of the day when you'd rather go someplace else, maybe grab some coffee or beer because Portland is known for beer and coffee. But to underscore the importance of what we are talking about, allow me to share some news from my native Las Vegas. How many of you have heard of the MGM cybersecurity incident? Raise your hands. In case you think this is not important, it simply shows why we have to be compliant, because they would say compliance is a bunch of checklists, but no. Compliance can mean more than that. It could mean security. It could mean the difference between keeping your clients safe and being in the headlines, just like MGM. This topic is very important because, as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. All great plans are nothing if they are not implemented. From experience, compliance has always been a problem with IT projects in general, and PCI in particular. Please raise your hands if you believe compliance is a breeze in the park, PCI compliance especially. None, because it is always a challenge. And I'll be happy to share my insights gained from years of experience, as well as some of the mistakes which I hope you will not make. I started out as an accountant and auditor, and then realized that IT is very important in all that we do. So I started earning some knowledge and certifications, worked in IT compliance, dabbled a little bit in various roles in the IT department, such as user provisioning and access control. I made some mistakes, and hopefully, with this presentation, you will not commit the same mistakes that I did. Although my experience is mostly in gaming or gambling or the casino industry, hospitality, entertainment, and retail. In the entertainment, convention, and now sports capital of the world. The lessons I wanted to share apply to all industries, in all locations around the world, and especially with regards to PCI DSS version 4.0 compliance. PCI was modified in response to the changes in the IT threat environment and enterprise risk. Enterprises have more internal and external threats to contend with. There are more ways to compromise cardholder data environment system components than ever before. Hence, it is important for PCI SSC not only to keep up, but be a few steps ahead in safeguarding payment card information. It is equally important for us to keep pace as well by learning the advantages and benefits that version 4.0 has to offer to our customers. I observed from my extensive years of experience in enforcing PCI compliance, as well as in conversations with my peers and publicly available knowledge, that an effective PCI compliance professional, especially one who pushes new compliance standards such as 4.0, must possess and practice. Ironically, for a technical standard, the key ingredients for being an effective change agent is anything but technical. A good IT compliance professional should take note of the reality that the business mission, vision, objectives, and strategy shapes what he or she does. At the same time, he or she has to take note of his capabilities and limitations and work around those to be an effective compliance professional in the enterprise. There will always be resistance to change, and he or she must have both the mindset and the collaborative attitude to overcome it. Also, a lot of compliance professionals easily get infected by the negative attitude of coworkers and even management in the enterprise. Hence, a robust, positive outlook rooted not in wishful thinking, but in reality is important in maintaining the spirit and the energy of PCI compliance professionals as he or she goes about with his vital role in the enterprise. Resistance is always a problem, and that is because PCI compliance professionals are dealing not with logical beings, but with fellow humans. Employees and managers understand the rationale for changes, but will nevertheless be apprehensive of changes to the usual way they comfortably do their work. Moreover, any change in one aspect of the technology, people, process, triad of PCI compliance is like tossing a pebble in the pond with the water rippling in all directions. For instance, figuring out whether to do the defined versus the customized approach across the 12 PCI requirements could mean more time for the various IT departments, such as network, architecture, app dev, and so on, as they deliberate and answer questions at the expense of operational IT work. With change always comes the risk of overlooking something, which can cost money, put the enterprise reputation at risk, or slow down operations altogether. The first habit is pretty much an obvious requirement. Any PCI compliance professional must be conversant with the requirements of both the outgoing version 3.2.1 standard, as well as the new incoming PCI compliance standard, or version 4.0. I'm sure someone will ask about the reason why we are moving from version 3.2.1 to version 4.0. Hence, the PCI compliance professional must be able to articulate the differences between the two and how those differences can impact the enterprise processing, transmission, and storage of cardholder data. I'm sure you've been asked countless times, why adopt version 4.0? I come from a sales background before accounting, audit, and now IT compliance. And I always start with the features, advantages, and benefits. Features are the what, and benefits and the advantages are the why I should be version 4.0 compliant. Salesmanship is part of every effective compliance professional's toolbox. And a good way to sell a new product especially those who are true believers of the previous version, is to be conversant with the features of both the previous version and the new one, and why adopting the new version makes sense. Habit number 2. Most IT compliance professionals believe that the enterprise must always follow everything that the IT framework prescribes. In reality, the enterprise needs are first and foremost. Although following industry standards are just as important, there are instances when there are technical and business reasons for not doing so. Hence, the PCI professional should interpret and implement PCI compliance requirements in light of enterprise needs and objectives, but should always remind and be aware of the risks and the corresponding compensating controls in case management wants to go in a certain direction. Number 3, all enterprises are like boats in the ocean. As they move towards their destination, waves and the wind pushes around it. At the same time, the actions of the captain, that's you, and the crew determine how fast or slow, how safe or dangerous the boat moves to its port of call. The same is true of a typical enterprise. The type of industry it is in, for instance, determines the opportunities and risks of doing business. And the same, for instance, some businesses are in healthcare and you have to protect your PHI. And as you all know, ransomware has been targeting a lot of hospitals recently, which is why protecting valuable data, knowing your crown jewels, is very important. So study your internal environment, but at the same time, the external pressures that would put your enterprise at risk. As the Latin phrase, primus inter pares, or first among equals state, the same is true with any enterprise. Some officers may be higher up in the organizational chart, but the real power may lie in who they listen to. An effective PCI compliance professional is one who knows who to communicate with. Does the CEO listen more to the CIO? Then any unbudgeted IT investments in the middle of the year that is geared towards PCI compliance may not easily be overridden by the CFO and other numbers crunchers. Know thyself. We all have different skill sets and different professional backgrounds. I rose from accounting and audit to IT, audit, and compliance. Hence, I have a very strong background in the nuances of accounting, applications, and controls, as well as evaluating evidence when conducting an audit. Although I dabbled in point-of-sale application and managed the domain controller for a while, I am not as strong technically. In contrast to IT compliance professionals who come from networking or application development or database management. Hence, ideally, an effective PCI compliance professional should bulk up on areas that he or she is not competent. This refers to reading and interpreting the standards in the greater context of the business, and this relates to the previous one that I talked about earlier. I believe that enforcing a certain requirement for its own sake is not a good way to enforce compliance. It's like telling them it's my way or the highway. From experience, it doesn't work that way. I believe that enforcing a certain requirement means you have to understand the needs of your company, the strategy, but at the same time, communicate the rationale, not only to IT, but to all the other stakeholders, especially the frontline employees of the company who will carry out the day-to-day storage, processing, and transmission of cardholder data. Reality. The reality is not that bad. Compliance professionals are always viewed with professional skepticism, and it comes with the territory. They rank highest together with auditors and investigators when it comes to company team members. How many of you dreaded the phrase, "the auditors are here"? I used to be an auditor myself, and I am in compliance, and I still dread it. But it's a matter of communicating what needs to be done. And from experience and from feedback from peers, actively communicating and seeking the viewpoint of team members who will carry out the PCI DSS version 4.0 requirements is more likely to engender cooperation rather than resistance. We're almost there. Yay! Despite the negative attitude of other employees in the enterprise, an attitude that shows, "I hear you and will work with your concerns," can carry the day when it comes to PCI compliance. People have different motivations for working in an enterprise, but they are united, and I'm sure you're united in your desire to protect your jobs and your company. If the PCI compliance professional can align with what he does, with what motivates the people, what motivates your team members, then you will have an easier time enforcing changes in PCI compliance. I have to admit there are days when the slow pace of compliance makes me think that compliance is so difficult. To be an effective PCI compliance professional, one has to anticipate these roadblocks, figure out a way around it. We call it in IT the workaround, but you already know that. And be psyched up to believe that PCI compliance is important. And judging from the recent events in Las Vegas, it is important. Most fellow IT compliance professionals focus on the technology aspect of IT compliance. But from my experience, it is important to focus on the people aspect. Remember what Jenny Radcliffe stated earlier and what Kevin Mitnick said? There is no patch for human stupidity. So we have to focus on the people side of everything that we do. If you need to remember one thing from this presentation, it is this well-worn cliche. People matter. Put people first. I hope I added some value to your time with me today. The presentation is meant to help you enforce PCI DSS version 4.0 using the acronym TOM. I'm not a fan of Major Tom, but Tom is easier to remember. The 10 habits are obviously longer than the 7 habits. Everyone is well-versed. And you can thank the recent US economic events, inflation, why I stretch it from 7 to 10. But Tom can help you memorize it and always anticipate or try to anticipate financial, reputational, and operational risk. Communicate this with management and the board and work with key players to mitigate it. So feel free to reach out to me after this presentation. I would like to thank the PCI SSE team, Abby, Mark, Liz Terry, Wen. Our sponsors, my fellow PCI audit and compliance professionals, that's you, for the opportunity to share and speak about my knowledge and expertise in this field. So thank you very much.